for me, the greatest past master as a reference would be Socrates, almost without any doubt in my mind. I often ask the question of guests that I'm interviewing. I've asked the question many times over the last few years, if you were to have a, great banquet in the sky, who would you invite to that banquet? Or I've also asked the question, if you were forced to live for 1,000 years on a desert island, you can only choose one companion, who would it be? And that's a question I enjoy asking of people, because it often forces you to refine your lens as to the kind of character, the kind of frequency that you find the most bearable in life. And for me, I think it's the life and times of Socrates definitely has inspired me more than any other. I think because Socrates had this extraordinary ability to reduce the perplexity of life down to pure truth and right action, and he exemplified it, I think, in a way that I'm not sure that outside of the obvious historical references, be they fictitious or apocryphal, the Master Jesus or Gautama Buddha, or any of the kind of great archetypal characters. For me, Socrates was a patently historical figure who lived and breathed, walked, talked, moved amongst his brethren. And for those who know about Socrates, you'll know that he died in an extraordinary way, where he ultimately poisoned himself on hemlock. But the great trial of Socrates is, for me, one of the greatest stories, which is when he was accused of contaminating the minds of the young. Why? Because he refused to conform to the social and political wiles of his time, refused point blank to do it, and spoke pure truth on the street corner, so to speak, or in the market square to younger people. He cared more about them because he recognized that they were the least contaminated minds and hearts. And of course, at that time in the ancient world, it was a lot of skullduggery going on. Politicking had really reached a kind of zenith, and it got to the point in his age, very much similar to the contemporary time in our day, when speaking pure truth is regarded as an act of madness. And to speak pure truth today is to disenfranchise yourself against the status quo. And it's a very dangerous thing. It's okay to speak a little bit, against the status quo. Allowances are made for that. We're allowed to be slightly rebellious. But if you consistently speak against the status quo by speaking to pure truth, you slowly but surely enmitize yourself. You become an enemy of the status quo. And if the flame of pure truth that you adhere to, that you hold, starts to become a true beacon in the dark to a lot of people, in the way that Socrates' flame did become in his age a beacon to younger people, and he genuinely started to inflame and incense the minds and the hearts of younger people against the injustices of the time, then he became hugely problematic to the status quo. But the conundrum of his life was that he was beloved. He was beloved even by the Senate, by the people who ended up condemning him to death. They didn't want to kill him. And they sent a great many messages to Socrates and invited him to step back and rein it in. And don't be so outspoken, Socrates. We love you very much. And of course, we all know that you speak the truth of things, but you're causing a lot of instability. And yet he couldn't but speak to truth. And so he continued to the point that he was necessarily vilified by the Senate and by the power elite, who ended up putting him on trial for the simple reason that he continued to go to the market square and speak to young people and speak truth. And so when they finally had him arrested and incarcerated and put on trial and then sentenced to death, even on the eve of his death, which was death by hemlock, by poisoning, they sent a message to him on the eve before his death sentence, when he was in jail, and said to him, Socrates, there's a cart with a horse outside the jail. The jail is going to stay open tonight. Just leave, just quietly leave, and the horse and cart will take you out into the country, and you can retire and live your life in peace. But please just leave, just go. And he refused to do it. He refused to do it because, as he stated to them, he said, no, gentlemen, I can't do that in honor. I live by the law that we've created. I am a citizen. And if our law has become so bankrupt, so morally bankrupt, that it will sentence to death an honest man, then I will be that honest man, and I will fall on that sword, because that will exemplify the corruption of our system. And so the Senate were in tears. People were very unhappy about it. But the following day, the day of his sentence, he invited into his jail, into his prison room, his cell, his students, and they were allowed to come in, and they gathered around him on his bed. And he continued speaking in a very kind of existential way, deeply philosophical and metaphysical about what he was going through, what he was feeling, how it felt to be a condemned man, how he loved his student body, how he loved life, didn't want to die, and yet was compelled to drink the hemlock. And he did drink the hemlock. And even as he was dying, he was describing to his students who were crowded around his bed, and they were all in tears. And he was describing to them the process that he was going through, describing how he was losing feeling in his toes and his feet, and how the poison was slowly moving its way up to his heart. And he died, he perished in front of them. And that to me is a beautiful story, which exemplified a beautiful man who exemplified the very best of fully actualized human beings, who will, in a sense, self-immolate or self-sacrifice on point of honor, knowing that that would actually do more to change the hallmark of corruption than had he taken the easy route and simply left and gone and lived a peaceful life. So for me, Socrates, just by virtue of the trial that he went through and the way he died, exemplified pure truth and right action in the living moment. And that is my rationale for loving Socrates more than any other man in history. But of course, one looks over the shoulder and can see so many beautiful souls whose lives also exemplify. Joan of Arc is a classic example as well of somebody who died on pain of truth and honor, and powerful archetype she was. And in terms of a more sanctified life that didn't end violently, but that meant so much Florence Nightingale is one of my all-time favorite archetypes and historical figures, because again, she simply kept it real, kept it simple, and refused to be pulled into politics and money and corruption for the duration of her life. In any event, I'll leave it at that. But I would say that Socrates is by far my greatest character and the man who I would embrace the most.